Hey everybody, it's Keely Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It's September 11th, 2024. We are in the Toronto Metropolitan University Library. It's being cool. Room 860. So we finished, going with the 7 habits, we're just gonna jump right in. So we finished habits last week. And so that was when it's done at 2:12, and then we go into the next. Hey, let's see the next part here. So we had, so we go from the bottom is dependence up to interdependence, right? That's like the model that he's using here. And in the beginning, these are from dependence to independence. We have to learn the first 3 independent principles or habits. So the first habit is be proactive. Then we learn habit 2, begin with the end in mind. And then we do habit 3, put first things first, right? So it's self-awareness and making decisions. And then there's knowing what decisions to make, which is your goals. And then how do you manage your time when you've decided those things? And these are all private things. They're just things you do for yourself. It's an independence thing. And then once we have instilled those in our life, which can take some time, like I'm still working on habit 3, seeing things from a not urgent but important perspective, and then also managing the stress, right? So we're in independence. Let's assume we worked on that. Now what we're going to do is go to the public victory. There's things that in our relations with others, there's 3 principles and habits that he wants us to focus on. And so the first one is habit 4, think win-win. And then we have habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And then habit 6, synergize, which is like cooperate. And so before we get into this, he's going to describe what a public victory is and some principles that all 3 habits, it applies to all 3 of those habits, right? So this is, part 3, public victory. And this section is called Paradigms of Interdependence. And so this is on page 215 of this edition. So we're looking at Paradigms of Interdependence. I'm not sure where it is in your online copy.
I got it.
Okay, so everybody else, that's the situation. So I'm going to share my screen, and we have some slides to go through for this this chapter. Okay, there it is. So we have the 7 habits of highly effective people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the main principles that I drew from this chapter. I kind of just put them all at the beginning, and then we'll go through. So I'll read the slides first. That's kind of the way we'll do it, and then we'll go through the book. So there's 2 slides of principles from this. So one thing he says is a quote from Samuel Johnson: "No friendship without confidence, and no confidence without integrity." So he's saying first you have to have integrity within yourself, and then you can have friendships with others, because confidence within the self is something that's needed for our friendships with other people. You can't talk your way out of problems you behave yourself into. This is in relation to a guy who was having problems with his wife, and she felt uncomfortable about some things. And Stephen Covey just references how you can't, it's the way she feels isn't going to change by things that you say. It's how you're acting that is important.
I don't understand this. What do you mean by no friendship without confidence, and no confidence without integrity? So first we need to have integrity.
Yeah.
And then we have confidence, and then we have friendship.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because if you don't know what your goals are, or you can't keep commitments with yourself, then you're going to have problems making commitments and keeping them with other people. And so that will compromise any friendship that you have. That's a quote from Samuel Johnson that he's using.
Is that why he talked about the first 3 habits before he entered into interdependence? Because the first 3, I can understand, will help the integrity and the confidence.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we want to make sure that we take care of ourselves first. We become independent, he would say, and then we can more fully cooperate with others, right? And then from a parenting context, like when we talk about generations of humans, right, we want to, the new generation, teach them independence, and then teach them to cooperate with others, to share that independence, which is interdependence, right? So he says self-mastery and self-discipline are the foundation of good relationship with others. And because if you don't have mastery over yourself or self-discipline, then all of your relationships can be compromised because of that. And he says, stop treating the symptoms and start treating the problem. So sometimes we can see surface level appearances and what we think the real issue is. We may not know what the cause is, right? So if somebody's upset, their current emotional expression really isn't the problem. It's the thing they're upset about, right? So if you're depressed, what are you depressed about, right? Or anxious, or someone's angry, for example. He says, listen and seek to understand. So that's like a little, foreshadowing of the 2 chapters from now. Next chapter is win-win. Then the one after that is the understanding chapter. And really what that's about is our communications with somebody will be more effective if we understand their position and perspective before we try to present our own. Because then we can, in one sense, speak to them in their own language or the terms they use or the way they understand stuff. Or we can communicate what we observe with the terms that they use too. I guess it's the same thing, but yeah. Okay. Make what is important to the other person as important to you as the other person is to you. So for example, and he says that that's a way that you can make emotional deposits, like you can invest in somebody, and then that will bring about almost an equivalent amount of trust between you and the other person. And so sometimes people will value things that don't really matter to us. But to care about that person, right, and to want to build the relationship is to make that thing that you may not really care about yourself equivalent to the value that they have to you. So he talks about kids in this example, like what was it, like baseball. He's talking with some dad and his son, and the dad didn't like baseball, but the son loved it. But the dad went anyways to every game that year just to develop the relationship with the kid. And then the son's like, someone asked him about, like, do you like baseball? And then he was honest. He's like, no, I don't. But I care about my kid that much, right? And it could be anything really.
Can I go back a little early? So I still don't quite understand the second. You can't talk your way out of problems you behave yourself into.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about this?
So like, let's say that like you had amnesia and you wake up in a courtroom, right? And you don't really know what happened. And you're like, what's going on here? This is a very unfortunate simulation I found myself in. And they said, hey, you damaged this property. You threw a brick through, some window. And if they have video evidence, or if you actually did it, like let's say that you were sleeping, you had like sleepwalking disorder, right? And you did it without even knowing, then in that case, you can maybe be removed from responsibility. But if a criminal is saying that they didn't do the crime, just because they said they didn't do it doesn't change the situation or change the fact what their behavior, the output of their behavior. Like if you think about reality, there's how my behavior physically interacts with things, what people see and what you're doing. But then there's like what I say. And I might not even be like trying to deceive anybody. I just might not even know what I do. Maybe I have a bad memory, or I just don't have awareness. I wasn't paying attention, right? So I didn't actually encode that data into my brain to remember. And so
what you behave is much more important than what you talk in terms of how you what kind of impression that you want to give to other people.
Yeah, so another way to say is like my actions are greater than my words.
Right. My actions are greater than my words.
The things that you decide to do, right? And sometimes decisions can be difficult. And so this is a good thing and a bad, it could be a bad thing for some people, but once you learn to act in a healthy way, then it doesn't really matter what you say. People will just appreciate you. So then he says, make what is important to your person. So we did that. Okay, so next slide. So this is the other half of the principles. If you cultivate the habit of always keeping promises you make, you build bridges of trust. And so this is why there's the independence habits first, so that if you make a promise, like for example, I'm going to be at the Philosophy Society. I'm going to come here and we're going to talk about stuff, right? I would put that in my planner or write it down like a habit 3 thing based on my role as whatever my title is of this organization. And yeah. And so if I don't have that as a habit, I forget my appointments. And like sometimes with one of my counselors, I for whatever reason, I'm so comfortable with the person, I forget my appointments with them in the morning sometimes. And I feel really bad after, And so my relationship with him becomes depreciated because I don't have healthy habits of myself, right? Relationship difficulties rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals. So this isn't really a principle per se, but it's like maybe we can massage it into a principle. He's basically saying that if your roles with other people or your goals with them are ambiguous or contradictory, then our expectations of each other can have problems, right? We're not really going to get what we want because we don't even know what it is, or it contradicts something else. Be loyal to those who are not present. Build the trust of those who are present. Defend those who are absent. Retain the trust of those present. So this is almost like Rudyard Kipling's poem, If.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great poem. We should almost just read it really quick. Let's read this poem together because it's so good. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about and don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give away to hating, and yet don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stood and built them with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew, serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. When we go to this point by Covey, I feel like he is in some ways saying that being honorable or a virtuous person, and Rudyard Kipling's like poem, If, kind of goes through some circumstances and how we ought to respond to them, right? I feel that that's kind of what he's trying to say here. The next principle, to be trusted, it is said, is greater than to be loved. So he gives this example of how, sometimes you have to tell people, like, first having integrity with yourself, right? So what is true and what is false? If I lie to myself, then I'm confused all the time, right? Because there's like, it's like, what is the value of things that I think or believe? If there is no value, then it's going to be a very confusing existence, right? I need to have some kind of trash bin to throw out the garbage thoughts and then really keep the good ones. That's what philosophy kind of supposed to be, It's trash compactor. That's a funny way to think of it. I like that.
On that one, I thought about something. I mean, this is pretty good. But for me, I noticed recently there's a trend, especially among political figure.
Mm.
They are not obeying like this. Your behavior should be more important than your talk. This day they're focusing on how to be charming,
Okay.
and then how to talk. How to charisma.
Sure.
Charisma.
Yeah.
And then even though they didn't follow what they promised, there's fan that there's the fan of this figure. Just doesn't matter what he said. They just trust him. So these days, I just watched a lot of this. Seems like in Stephen Curry's, maybe they'll say, oh, this is old school, whatever. But these days with the internet, with the mass media, whatever. So I just need to build a fancy, an impression, because people are not that rational. People are just emotional, they just follow you.
Well, there's like system one and system two thinking.
Mhm.
You know, like system one is very like evolutionary based fight or flight. And then system two is later development, right? Like reasoning and abstract thinking and stuff. And so sometimes like charisma is good, but content is also important. And people that are engaged in system two thinking, that are like reasoning through stuff, they like think about their values, they're being philosophical, right? Those people will see past the charisma and they're not going to be persuaded by it, right? But people that are very like system one thinking, they're very like fear-based, for example, you just like it's a different language almost to them because they're just feeling things.
Yeah.
And so it becomes more of like an entertainment kind of situation, right? And in some ways you can just see this with Donald Trump. Before he was president, he was like a TV host, right? On The Apprentice or whatever. And he loved that. And he did well in that context enough for him to say, let's do this with the country and the world or whatever, right? And you know, like the fact that if that is like, again, we're have to sort out what's the causal property here, but let's say that was the causal property, then it kind of just shows, maybe you could say, a limitation of democracy or an embedded value within democracy that maybe is self-contradictory. Is it in the interest of the people to do such a thing, to vote this person into power? Are these properties that are persuading them in their interest, right? And so, you know, maybe it's like that bravado thing, like we have like an evolutionary instinct. You know, if there's people that are cowering away from the threat, and then there's enough people with bravado, some of them will survive. You know, whether it's like a tiger or fucking even like a forest fire. You need to get out of here, you know?
But I know that you talk about system one and system two. I mean, for those figures, you know, to be able to, you know, have the appealing, they must have those, you know, a lot of people that probably, you know, using your theory, still using very much the system one. Otherwise, how they cannot be appealing? And also, I also noticed a trend that you know, sometimes if you use a system two, you kind of rationalize, you know, you kind of philosophize it. They call you like you have some kind of arrogance of elite.
For system two?
For system
Well,
two,
okay,
right?
yeah. I think you could be elite, have an elitist arrogance to you in a system two mode, but not everyone that's being reasonable is necessarily arrogant. Part of being philosophical is like intellectual honesty, trying to understand. And then like, if you can't in the moment apologize or have remorse, go and reflect, take however long you need, and then come back and do it. As long as you do it. As long as you go through that process in yourself, whoever you are, for whatever you've done, you know? And that's all we really want as a society, I think. And that cancel culture stuff is just like a blunt instrument to try to like, you know, but in its best intentions. Maybe they are trying to burn people alive. Maybe that's also a thing, like, you know?
Yeah,
But,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
All right, so back in the ship. So to be trusted is greater than to be loved. So just being honest with people. Sometimes you may say things that are hard. It's hard to say it, you know, and it's hard to hear it. And so in the beginning, you might lose there might be some friction with people in your life. But if you're always, and that's kind of like me, like I'm genuinely almost always 100% honest with people. Sometimes I will not say some things, you know, but if they would want to know, then I would usually tell them. Or if as their friend or whatever capacity I'm relating to them, like a counselor or consultant or whatever it is, or like the house manager, if I observe something that is in their interest and they may not be interested in hearing it, I'll still try. I feel it's my duty to find a way to tell them, right? Because I care about them. Not telling somebody, or like let's say there was a string attached to you and you were running and you're drenched in gasoline, but the string was on fire. And you could just cut it if you knew, but you didn't know because you're running and it's behind you. To not tell the person is to let them suffer longer or greatly, right? So telling them, even though it's scary that you're drenched in gasoline and there's a little, you know, thing coming at you, it's better to know and then do something about it. Because some things, like our behavior, you could try to chain someone to a bed or to whatever, But ultimately, it's like that's to control them. Like they have control over their central nervous system, that sense of autonomy, right? And so it's better for you to take care of yourself. I'll do my best to take care of mine, right? Because I'm in control of myself. And that's a reason why to tell them, is because that's not good for you to know. Why is it good for you to know? So maybe you can avoid them, but then you don't really care about them. It's better to find a way to tell people the truth so that they can take care of their shit. Fucking take care of it. Stop acting that way,
So you said, I try to understand. So you're saying that you, a person, have the duty to tell other people the truth, so that can help them to improve their life. Is that
if they would want to know?
Mhm.
That's one condition.
Mhm.
Another condition is if it is in their interest and you have sufficient trust with them, or a relationship where you care, and then they may not want to hear it, they may want to hear it. If they don't want to hear it, it still may be more important to tell them when you weigh the costs and benefits of knowing. And then and so you just got to kind of go through that. And if they don't want to hear it, it's like you have to say that you care enough is whatever negativity is created from them hearing it, you're willing to like go through the restitution. That's the responsibility part.
Did you hear that the plateaus? You're probably familiar. The cave, the story of cave. I think there's a part. I don't know. Maybe they developed the theory that the guy who walked out of the cave, see the sunshine.
Yeah.
He came back and tried to tell his fellows.
Yes.
That that there's a world outside.
Mm-hmm.
But he got blamed. He got blamed by the other fellow, saying that you're killing us,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't understand. They actually beat him up.
They would kill him if
they'll kill him. And then they will probably say, "Oh, how dare you? You're very arrogant. You said you know everything.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a at this stage, people talk about the arrogance of elite. Like who are you? What who are you? You're talking to me like you're superior than me. How do you you know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, yeah, again, some people, they may lack the cognitive capacity to reason at the same level as somebody else. Their brains just don't really do it like at that level, right? Like FASD, for example, or other developmental disorders or whatever, brain damage. They could have also not really learned. Like going to university, taking like a liberal arts course, right? Sorry. I'm just like talking a lot. That can give person the practice to learn how to communicate and reason and stuff, right? Now, like arrogance is not accepting you're wrong when you're wrong. Like being patronizing is like talking down to somebody. Being condescending is speaking from a position, of superiority. And I'm just like, I got like a thing. There's like COVID floating around this building or something like that. Gotta meditate later. Okay. And so it's just because you're being reasonable doesn't necessarily mean that you're being condescending, patronizing, or arrogant, right? Through reason, we can prevent those things from happening. So it doesn't have to be the case that being reasonable is correlated with arrogance. It could be the opposite. Critical thinking and the habit and developing the psychology to accept feedback and to think about things is important, right? Like confirmation bias is a problem where we seek things that confirm what we believe and we avoid things that disconfirm it. And so sometimes I think it's to get over that, it can be useful to understand why we believe this. Like, what is the utility of the belief? Because if we're having a difficulty letting go of it, and we know that, and there's evidence it may be false, what function does it provide for you? Like, what is it doing? Because you didn't always believe it. There was some point where you're like we said earlier, philosophy is the garbage compactor that we just like sort through the trash and we keep the good stuff. At one point, that belief came through and you kept it. You're like, this is good. Like, there's a bunch of objects on the table. Some of them I'm going to keep. Some of them I'm not going to keep anymore. Like, once I'm done drinking this coffee, it goes in the garbage, right? But this object is useful. I keep it around. I've had it for like 2 years. I don't even know how long. It's a cheap mouse. Like $20. But it has utility to me. But at a certain point, I might not have utility anymore. So if it was broken and it didn't work, and I kept it, and I like had the broken mouse here and the working one, you'd be like, well, why do you have that broken mouse there? What function does it provide for you? Maybe it's like a memory aid. I remember all the times where I used this mouse before, but that's crazy. That doesn't even make sense. Like a hoarder behavior, right? So when we talk about confirmation bias, like the pattern of seeking out things that confirm what we believe and like shying away or avoiding things that may disconfirm it. Maybe we could make it easier to not be susceptible to that bias by understanding what the utility of our beliefs are. And then maybe there's a different way we could get that same end met if this specific means doesn't make sense. Like, for example, someone's religious, right? Why do you believe that? Like, what do you get from it? Well, we could talk about some things. Like, it could reduce some of their suffering. It can reduce anxiety about death. Like, where are my loved ones that have died? I'm going to see them again. It can give a sense of, it can help us be better people. You know, so like it gives a sense of morality. You don't stray away. You can repeat mantras to yourself. It has a lot of utility, right? And it gives a sense of community, of belonging. Is a common language between me and my people, like my family or people of my culture, whatever that might be. We can just talk about Jesus, and then we can it's like we're old friends. I've never met you before, but Jesus or Muhammad, whatever, you know, and then you have this commonality with this person. So there's it meets a lot of functions as a thing. And so if you say there's no evidence for God or any of the miracles, for example, there's no way it could happen. Instead, like the reason that faith is there as like a very, you know, a flexible bridge, you know what I mean? Like or a spacer. We box our beliefs together and don't allow them to connect with other ones. Because other ones, like the periodic table of elements or like the forces of the universe, would contradict some things, right? Like splitting the sea, you know, or whatever other miracles in the Judeo-Christian belief system. And so it's providing some function. And so this is a response to that. So we're going back to...
Sorry.
Yeah.
On that, you just talk about the religious. What about someone respond to you? He said, "Oh, I believe in God, not because they believing give me this function.
Mhm.
It's just because I believe he's real, and the function is the natural result of that believing. It's not because I seeking for that function, then I believe. It's because I believe, then I have those functions. You know, whatever. Because if they say, "Oh, I believe in God because I want those functions," that's kind of like a very consequential utilitarian or the motivation is not that pure. You know, it's real. So,
well, yeah, they may not you should believe it intrinsically, you know, but I don't know if that would actually be that might be someone's subjective report.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it would actually be the reality of the situation.
Okay, so
the belief acquisition, like how did you acquire the belief? Because it could just be to make your parents happy, because a lot of people are socialized when they're younger and they're indoctrinated, right? And there's just these implicit consequences. Like that person was a blasphemer and they burned him alive. So I don't want that to happen, so I'll just do whatever you say. You know, and those kinds of forces exist, right? Or being perceived as the devil. Like I've been called the devil. I just laugh at the person. I'm like, okay, you know.
Oh, okay. I got it. So let me give you an example. For example, my own example. You know, I actually believe, kind of believe there's something. How to say? What's the word? That I cannot see. It's a metaphysical, transcending, whatever. You know, it's out of this. You know, what I believe is not because it functions to me, is because I like Kant, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
So he basically rationalized, using the rationality to prove, or to analyze using logical or whatever. I mean, you may not disagree, you may not agree with me, but I'm just saying, the reason I believe, I kind of like, I believe it's not because I want those good things, but the result of my belief after reading Kant is now I kind of feel like, I know I think it's a human nature to, for example, to sacrifice myself. There's something bigger than life.
Okay.
Just because that rationality, the logic is so persuading, it persuades me.
Sure.
So on that one, I think it's a little bit different from, what you just talk about, like, because I believe in God, so I can go to heaven, or I can. So it's a little bit different. It's because at the very beginning, I don't know. I just read the books, and I think it makes sense. And then he's not talking about Christian God. He's just talking about the morality, the source of the morality is from something transcendental. It's not just from what we see here.
Yeah, we could talk about that, but yeah, like the categorical imperative.
Yeah, categorical imperative. So it has that transcendental part.
Sure, that's fine. Like, there's different ways that you can acquire beliefs, right? Like, that's one thing that I'm talking about. Like, and then there's like, I'm giving this example of like in religion, how there's functions with the belief, and other beliefs you can be persuaded of it and then accept consequences after you've been persuaded of it, right? Like, you can go both ways. Sure, like there's many reasons why I think, but then we could still say that but now there is still some function of the belief. It gives some like existential clarity. Like, this is the way the universe works, right? And before there may have been confusion. I'm not really sure. And there may have been some degree of, I don't know, anxiety or suffering. It doesn't really matter, but it had some place within your sense of self or awareness in general. And then now it's making that more clear to you, Okay, let's just keep on going because So the last principle here is no amount of technical administrative skill and laboring for the masses can make up for a lack of nobility of personal character in developing relationships. And so he's talking about this one example by Hammarskjöld, that devoting yourself to one person is better than distributing yourself amongst many people. And what he's saying is that, like, sometimes the closest people to us we might not have a good relationship with, and then we can spend our time with other people that we're not so close to, that the relationship is easier. So it's better, but a lot of suffering can be derived from that close relationship. So it's better to improve or do something about that first, and then you'll have more gains coming out of it, right? Then any gains you get from all these other people that aren't as close to you. And so that's part of what he's saying here. And the nobility part is that integrity, right? And when he talks about the technical administrative skill, that's like that personality ethic. So when you go back to like the Trump example, like the system one thinking, that's what he's saying not to do. He's saying you need to work on your character. And that's going to involve, a working of system one, like dealing with your fears and your emotions and stuff like that, or your impulses, and then making sense of things in a reasonable way based on values and goals and your place within situations in the group, like your role, and then having a path to do that with.
So are you saying that we should, a mature person or a personal growth, we should move away from system one to system two? Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes you need to use both. Your instincts are very useful in some contexts, but in other contexts, it's important to know how to think through things. So the reference for this would be Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. So that's a book.
I read it. I read it. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to the first section in Paradigms of Interdependence. So self-mastery and self-discipline as a foundation for good relations with others. So again, that's the private victory precedes public victory. Interdependence, this is one of his main things he likes to say, is a choice only independent people can make. All right, so if you're still dependent, if you don't know how to be proactive, you don't understand what your roles and goals are, you can't manage your life, and interdependence is not a long-term, durable kind of option for you. The most important relationship ingredient is what we are, not what we do or what we say. And that goes back to his fundamental principle of your paradigms are the most inner part of you, the way you see things, which creates your beliefs, which leads to your behavior. Behavior is still important, more important than just saying stuff, the personality ethic, right? Your character. Duplicity sensed from others when our words and actions are inconsistent. So duplicity just means that you're like a hypocrite, right? Words and actions form superficial human resource techniques. And the supervisor, so he gives this example, you're like criticizing or saying bad things about the person behind their back. Now, I think in one sense, you could be, it depends on where this is coming from. If you're talking to a friend and you're like venting and getting emotional support because you're upset, that's different than trying to put somebody down when they're not around and like ridiculing them, right? Making them the object of ridicule or making fun of them.
Ridicule, object of ridicule, you mean making fun of him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there's two different ways we can interpret this at the least, right? So if you're with somebody and you're talking bad about some other person who's not present, if you're thinking that will increase your trust or relationship with the person who is present, it actually just shows a lack of your own integrity, is what he's trying to say. And that's why we read that poem, If, by Kipling. So the second slide, begin with the relationship with yourself and your circle of influence before building relationships with others. So this is just important. This is a part of what it means to be like an adult, right? And we might lose ourselves, even if we are technically an adult. Sometimes things happen and we lose ourselves and we have to come back. So this is the way you get back. So he talks about needs, a proactive, correct, principle-centered, organize, and execute around priorities with integrity. So he's just kind of like putting all of the first three habits together as what we need to do, right? And then lastly, he talks about the production capability, golden egg analogy, which gives synergistic results by open communication and positive interaction. So basically, like, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts is what he means by synergy. It's not just one person putting effort towards a goal. A group of people that are in harmony with each other, not in conflict, can create a better goal than just one individual. Now, Ayn Rand kind of disagrees with this. You know what would be a great book for us to do next? Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh,
I think that would be a good philosophy society book. I'm gonna put that in my little mental box here.
The guy traveled several states.
Yeah.
Montana.
Yeah. And so open communication, is based on properties of intimacy, like being transparent and vulnerable. And then the positive interactions, it would be the investments in the emotional bank account. I'm using Covey's terminology here, right? And so that's the production capability, investing in the relationship, and then you get the golden eggs out of that, right? So when we invest in these relationships, we get these, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts results. You'll have a greater output within your organization, your social group, whatever you're doing, when you go through this. Okay, so let's look at the text here. So we are on page 215. Let me just check our Google Meets. Very good. Okay. All right, so we're on paradigms of interdependence, right there. So we begin at the top here with that quote by Samuel Johnson. And he says, no friendships without confidence and no confidence without integrity. And so that's just summarizing the private victories come before public victories. So he says, before moving to the area of public victory, which is the next three habits, he wants to talk about effective interdependence and the fact that it can only be built on a foundation of true independence. Private victory precedes public victory. So he says, let's look back and survey where we've come through the book, determine where we've been and where we are in relationship to where we're going. We see we could have not gotten here without coming the way we came. There aren't any other roads, there's no shortcuts, no way to parachute in. You need to have maturity, strength of character, and the ability to maintain them. You can't be successful with other people if you haven't paid the price of success with yourself. So this is just like, next page, this is just like a necessary condition, a property of the human condition, we could say.
Yeah.
Right?
It's good. It's applied to a lot of things. Like
yeah.
Even to marriage.
Yeah. 216. So he's talking about an issue with this guy has having a problem with his wife, right? And his wife keeps on calling him every time he goes to these seminars. And he says she's nagging him, asking him all these questions. And he says, well, I don't enjoy this. You know, she knows all the right questions to ask. The reason is because he met her at a seminar like this when he was married to someone else. And so his wife, his current wife, this guy that in the story on 216, was anxious about him meeting another woman, right? And so he's telling Covey this story. And so Covey says, you just want a quick fix. He's like, you wish that you could just rewire her brain so her attitudes were different. And then the guy says, yeah, I'd like her to change. And then Covey says, my friend, you can't talk your way out of problems you behaved yourself into. So he's talking about, so Covey says, this is a dramatic, fundamental paradigm shift. You have to lubricate your social interactions. You can try to lubricate your social interactions with these quote unquote personality charisma techniques. But in the process, you're not focusing on your vital base of your character, the foundation that everything comes from. And he says, you can't have the fruits without the roots. And it's a principle of sequencing. Private victory precedes public victory. Self-mastery and self-discipline are the foundation of good relationships with others. You have to like yourself before you can like others. This idea has merit. If you don't know yourself, if you don't control yourself, if you don't have the mastery over yourself, it's very hard to like yourself. Maybe in some short-term superficial way you can. Real self-respect comes from the dominion over self, from true independence, the focus on habits 1, 2, and 3. Independence is an achievement. Interdependence is a choice only independent people can make. Unless we're willing to achieve real independence, it's foolish to try to develop human relations skills. When things get difficult, if we haven't developed this independence, we won't have the foundation to keep things together. The most important ingredient we put into any relationship is not what we say or what we do, but what we are. So again, your character is what you're fundamentally bringing to other people. And all those other things come out of the character. 217. If our words and actions come from superficial human relation techniques, the personality ethic or charisma, rather from our own inner core, the character ethic, others will sense the hypocrisy or duplicity. We won't be able to create and sustain the foundation necessary for effective interdependence. The techniques and skills that really make a difference in human interaction are the ones that almost naturally flow from the truly independent character. The place to begin building any relationship is inside ourselves, inside our circle of influence, our own character. As we become independent, proactive, centered, and correct principles, value-driven, and able to organize and execute around the priorities in our life with integrity, we then can choose to become interdependent, capable of building rich, enduring, highly productive relationships with other people. So the terrain ahead, entering a whole new dimension. Interdependence opens up worlds of possibilities for deep, rich, meaningful associations with increased productivity, serving, contributing, learning, and growing. Where we feel the greatest pain and frustration, the greatest roadblocks to happiness and success is in relationships with others. We're aware of this pain because of how acute it is. We can often live for years with the chronic pain of our lack of vision, leadership, or management in our personal lives. Feel uneasy and uncomfortable, and occasionally we try to reduce this pain, but it's chronic and we get used to it and learn to live with it. You habituate it, for example. When we have problems in our interactions with other people, we're very aware of this acute pain. It's intense and it won't go away. When we try to treat the symptoms with quick fixes and techniques, a Band-Aid, the acute pain is an outgrowth of a deeper chronic problem. Until we stop treating the symptoms and start treating the problem, our efforts will only bring counterproductive results. As we think of effective interaction with others, and he references his early definition of effectiveness, the PPC balance, which is the goose and the golden egg example. 218.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just go back a little bit earlier? Because this is to talk about how important to the character. You feel your character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people may argue that in today's world, actually those are taking advantage of some people using Trump as an example. oh, he succeed, to be a president, I mean, before, at least, former president. And actually in history, people with integrity, sometimes they don't have good fortune, like Socrates, they have a very
Yeah.
good integrity, but he got executed. So they will argue, yeah, you talk about so important of the character, but people will have good character. Jesus, another, got hanged, right? So crucified. So some people say, maybe short-sighted. Maybe don't look that long. A good person not necessarily have a good ending.
Yeah. So like Plato talks about this in the Republic, in the beginning of the Republic, and he says, you can choose to be, you can care about reality, which you really are, or your appearances, right? And the person who cares about their reputation or what they appear to be will focus on just other people's perceptions of them, not what they're doing or what they really are. It's reactive in some ways, right? And they can be loved for the appearances. Now, the person who focuses on reality, on what they really are, and they don't care about their appearances, they can be, he says, like racked and like tortured to death, even though they're a good person. And he like poses this question of what would you choose to be? Even if you're a good person, you can have the worst outcome, and part of it is like a lesson of integrity. Is that even though you could be like, tortured to death, it's better to be a good person because that could also happen to you, even if you only focus on the appearances. So there's being good, and then there's the perception of being good, right? And
But what if you're being hypocrisy? You may not be. You can get away from. Like Socrates also faced that temptation. Like actually not hypocrite. His student can say they can help him escape.
yeah,
Refused, right? He
Yeah.
refused.
They revoted.
Right. Yeah.
The first vote, they were going to let him free.
Right.
But then when they were determining, and then they got them to revote, they revoted, and he didn't do that. And then he said that he wanted to get like a stipend or whatever,
Right.
like a salary. He basically antagonized them so that they would kill him.
Right. I'm just saying, that basically his reason, he had a chance to run away, but he said, I'm a citizen of Athens, so I have to obey the law. The law. If I run away, then I cannot betray the law. So he has integrity, So he didn't run away. What I'm saying, people will say, oh, if I can be not that always integrity, I can get away from bad things, That's a big temptation. But if you insist on integrity, you could be in trouble.
Well, yeah. So again, we could talk about this with like certain states of the world, like like you're in Russia, for example, and maybe you're
like the body.
Yeah, or even if you're like husband or son is being sent off to war and you're upset about this, right? You want to be honest and have integrity, but I think there's a degree of safety too. You don't have to put yourself in front of the bullet and get shot and then talk about how guns are bad, And so I think there's like a place of safety where you can still maintain your integrity and be true to yourself. But in this, he's talking about like not even working on your skills. And again, when he's saying this, he's saying be proactive, know what your goals are, and manage your life, right? That's the kind of integrity he's talking about. So not doing those things and just trying to appear like you have integrity is a different thing than actually having integrity, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's so 218. An interdependent situation, the golden eggs are the effectiveness, the wonderful synergy, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, results created by an open communication and positive interaction with others. So once you develop those three habits, then your interactions with other people will improve as well. To get those eggs on a regular basis, we need to take care of the goose to create and care for the relationships that make those results realities. So a powerful metaphor in describing the relationships and defining the PPC balance in an interdependent reality. So next slide. So we talked about the emotional bank account now. We introduced this idea. The amount of trust. So basically, it's just that in our relationships, we have like a certain disposition with them. And when we relate to those people in our lives, we either increase the disposition, it becomes more positive, they like us more, or we decrease it. And so he calls this the emotional bank account. The amount of trust that's been built up in a relationship, the feeling of safeness. This is what it includes. Deposits are things like courtesy, kindness, honesty, and keeping commitments. Trust is sustained by continuing our deposits. So he says he gives this lighthouse analogy that we got in like chapter 2 or something. And to disregard how someone feels about you is like being the ship that tells the lighthouse to move. You're just going to crash into it, right? Your relationship will come to an end if you don't care about the other person and how they perceive you and feel about you. But there's the fake perception and then there's the real perception. And the real perception is, like he says, keeping commitments, for example. The most constant relationships require most constant deposits. People,
sorry, you don't care other people, but on the first, you also need to keep your integrity. You also said that private. What about the perception of others actually will affect your integrity? Maybe, do you need to please other people, or do you need to, like, regardless, because you're living in this society, you always impact by the society, by other people, how they look at you, and then sometimes there's a conflict, like what you really believe and what other people want you to believe. So in this case, you want to care about, you talk about people will expect you to be like a religious person.
Yeah. So integrity isn't just appealing to the what other people want. Right? You can make commitments to people, and that's something that you're choosing to do, right? You can be honest with them, like in this example, and you can be nice to them. And he goes through some examples in the chapter, but it's not. And he also says that, like previously, we just talked about how being honest might be that you're saying things that people don't want to hear, but they at least know that you're being honest, right?
But then they feel offended sometimes.
But over time, and your willingness to go through that offense and explain that you're not being malicious, but you're just trying to explain the truth or the data as you see it, right?
Using, again, I'm going back to Socrates, because he just telling the truth, but a lot of a lot of people at that time feel offended. That's why they persecuted him. So
well, but he also almost got himself killed because he asked for them to pay for his living expenses, and then they voted against it.
Okay,
the first vote.
Let him go, maybe he just. Right? But what about I mean that there's a definitely an element, but there's so many examples in history.
That's fine. Yeah. I'm just
So like Jesus, similar thing. If what Bible said is true, he keeps telling what the local Jewish authority doesn't like to hear, right? So, and then there's
Pontius
Pilate. There's many, there's some guy. So, because being offended, like the guy Bruno, right? He got burned live.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because he insisted the Earth, the sun, the sun is the center, the Earth,
Well, you got to make a choice. Like at the same time, like the people that we're naming, assuming that they're non-fictional, they made that sacrifice and they chose to go down that path. And so you have the option to be proactive and think about what matters to you. And if you want to go that distance, if you feel that it will impact humanity in a good way, you have the choice to do that. But you also could do it other ways too, right? I'm not saying that integrity necessarily means self-sacrifice. It doesn't have to go to that extent. Okay, let's see what we got here. So our most constant relationships require our most constant deposit. So he just means like people that are part of your life, right? People you interact with on a regular basis require more constant investment. So he's usually referencing his kids or
in a circle.
Yeah, his family and stuff. So next slide. So the example is his teenage son. It was in a withdrawn state with their emotional bank account. The kid was not open to discussing his decisions because trust is lost due to a lack of deposits. The best deposit, so he's like, well, what would that be? is to listen to the person without judging or preaching or reading your own autobiography, which means just like sometimes as we get older, we can say, oh, wow, when I was a kid, this happened to me, but you're not really listening to the person. You're connecting it to yourself. If genuine deposits are made, the overdrawn balance shrinks. The disposition starts to get better, more positive. Building and repairing relationships takes time. There's no quick fix. You need to focus on long-term investments. So 218. So he's introducing this emotional bank account. So he's like, okay, there's an analogy. We have the financial bank account. So that it's a service where we make deposits into and build up a reserve of money from which we can withdraw whenever we need it. The emotional bank account is a metaphor that describes the amount of trust that has been built up in a relationship. It's a feeling of safeness you have with another person. If I make deposits into an emotional bank account with you, I build up a reserve. The trust towards me becomes higher, and I can call upon that trust many times if I need to. We can make mistakes, and that trust level, the emotional reserve, will compensate for it.
Sorry, I still feel like, this emotional bank account things, especially when I apply to a human relation, it gives me a sense of a utilitarian.
Sure.
I invest time and energy, whatever resources on you is because then next time or if some crisis, then I could I can leverage whatever I build on, but isn't that another thinking is like, for example, I love my partner, but for example, not just because I want to. It's just the way it should be.
Sure.
Right. Okay. It's just the way I love the human being. It's just the way. It's just normative. It's just what it should be. It's not like I want to get something. Maybe I could get, but doesn't matter. I get or I don't get. I still should love my partner.
Sure.
Right.
So you're talking about like, it's not really utilitarian. It's more like, one is it's transactional. Right? It's a give and take. Yeah. The other thing is it's a means to an end. Right. Whereas you're talking about, well, there's this other thing, but it being an end in itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he, we could say we could classify it that way. He's talking about this because he's like looking at some problems, like when someone's kid doesn't want to clean up their room, or they're being rebellious, right? Or in business relationships, we're in problems in cooperation. And he's saying that investing in the relationship itself will lead, and you could say that you're just looking for a compliance, but he's doing this as a solution to the other problems that exist.
Yeah, because this sounds like some strategy, some tacit things, like if I want to achieve this goal, then I think I need to do this. If I want to make more money from you, then I need to not in the bad way, maybe in a win-win situation, but if we talk about what we should do, sometimes I thought about maybe I just shouldn't cheat anyone. For example, doesn't matter if I can get benefit later, I just simply I shouldn't cheat. Okay. That no matter whether I can get profit or not, when I help someone, it's not like I want some rewards, maybe he will help me in 5 years,
Yeah. That's a criticism for sure. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can have an intrinsic relationship, intrinsic values that you're getting out of something, and there can also be an extrinsic or an end for which it's a means, Okay, let's continue. So he says, we trust when the trust account is high, communication is easy, instant, and effective. If the person has a habit of being discourteous, disrespectful, cutting them off when they're speaking, overreacting, ignoring the person, it betrays the trust. The person will feel threatened, and the emotional bank account becomes overdrawn. So he's using this as an analogy to help us deal with some problems, is really what he's trying to say. So he says, if you really destroy a relationship, it's every word you say is going to be challenging with the person. If a large reserve of trust is not sustained by continuing deposits, for example, a marriage can deteriorate. The situation becomes one of accommodation. The two people simply live independent lifestyles in a respectful and tolerant way, or it can deteriorate towards hostility and defensiveness, flight or fight responses. They can start fighting verbally and stuff like that. And it can be a warfare in the courts. So then he says, the PPC lighthouse is there. We can either break ourselves against it or we can use it as a guiding light. So again, he's saying that this notion of people's disposition towards you is important. You can value them intrinsically, but there is this element of transactionalness, because even if I value them intrinsically, they'll have a different value for me, right? So like somebody just loves this person no matter what, but because they don't act in a good way that the other person likes, then it means that that person doesn't like them anymore and they can fall out of love, right? So we want the other person to feel good about our presence in their life, even if we have an intrinsic value for them. Our most constant relationships, like a marriage, require our most constant deposits. With continuing expectations, old deposits evaporate. Accounts with the people you interact with on a regular basis require more constant investment. Sometimes automatic withdrawals in your daily interactions or in their perception of you that you don't even know. For example, a teenage son, you want them to clean the room over a period of time, which is a withdrawal. The withdrawals exceed the deposits. The son is in the process of making some important decision, for example, that will affect the rest of their life. If the trust level is low, their communication will become closed or mechanical and unsatisfying, and they won't be open to discussing any important decisions. And this can also be in an organization too, if you're working with people, right? You're doing business. If you don't have a healthy relationship with them, difficult conversations will be even more harder to get through. The account, so you may have the wisdom and knowledge to help other people, but if the account is overdrawn, they'll end up making decisions on their own. In the case of, if it's your kid, it could be a short range emotional perspective that they have, and there could be long range term consequences that are negative.
I thought about something, maybe not direct, but I want to bring up, there's a debate yesterday, right? So one comment they talk about the difference between Democratic and Trump, is they say, this is just one of the comments. So they say the Democratic, like Harris, definitely say a lot of good words in principle, like the value-based.
Sure.
Like we should help Ukraine.
Yes.
Because that's what we should do.
Yes.
But Trump never say when being asked several times, do you want Ukraine to win? He didn't say that. He just say, I want the war over. And then so but
I didn't see the whole thing, so that's interesting.
But my question is actually Elon Musk after the debate he sent out Twitter. He said something. He admitted that Harris did better.
Good. That's good. I respect that.
Yeah, but he also said that the Democrats, the general meaning is like they say beautiful words, but they never deliver. So we have seen the last 3 years. I'm not. My question is, he said that even though like something like we need some change, and then also there's something about Trump. They say maybe he didn't say the right words, but he's more practical. He delivered. So I guess my question is that because this book widely read, this book talk about, I think there's a lot of practical wisdom, like when you should help people, you should talk to them more, invest. It's more on the practical side. So, but in terms of the politics, when you face, let's assume if this is the scenario, if someone talk very well, but maybe in value based, but maybe people have question about the practical wisdom, but the other guy maybe perceived as have the practical wisdom, especially in the geopolitical whatever, that's a one comment on this two candidates. What's your take on this?
Well,
which more is more important?
When you say
practical wisdom or the value,
well, yeah, I think that the way I'm understanding it, if the Democrats are making promises about values that are really good, but it's not being executed, is that because of them or because the Senate didn't pass it? Right. So I think we need to break that down. We can look at that empirically and see what their rates of success are and why did certain ones not occur. That's like a political science question, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just wouldn't want to overgeneralize and say that. Like, I think that Trump is not the Republican Party. Trump is a person today that wants to, that is representing this party. But Republican values are not necessarily tied to Trump or even Project 2025 for that matter, you know, or even the people that are alive today, right? The Republican Party is just like the Democratic Party. It's supposed to be something that is abstracted, that we are trying to live towards. And it's based on certain values like economic or religious values about immigration or relations with other nations and stuff. And so, and then there's concrete ways, i.e. policies, that we would enact those values, right? And so, yeah, I think that I don't have the data to talk about what these people have done, you know, and what their success rates are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's important to evaluate when you talk about a debate and what is the meaning of that. It's important to, you know, look at what the people are saying and understand it. And it's a system two thing, you know, it really is. Like inflation and the causes of inflation and who's responsible for what, you know, like COVID really was difficult for the economy and people. And so it's going to take some time to recover from that, right? And there's other factors too, like shipping. It's been difficult for shipping recently. There's other things that do impact it. It's not one person's fault. You know, it was, I empathize, like, I don't think Trump should be president, but I empathize with the man in the sense that, like, he got stuck with a shitty situation, right? He was not able to really deal with COVID. I don't think that he's not equipped for that, right? He's equipped for things like entertainment. If he had a smooth sailing time, it would have been easier for him, you know? But, and that's why him being president is not really a good thing. Maybe it'd be better for him to own his own media company, like Fox News, like have his own thing. He could have went that path instead and been still super influential, could have said whatever he wants. Like Alex Jones is another example of somebody like that, right? That's very influential and charismatic. He recently got hit pretty hard with the Sandy Hook stuff, and that makes sense, right? And so Trump is like that. He may not be going down that path that way. He went a different way, but he has the same kind of personality, you know? Okay, let's go back. So where are we here? Yeah. So relationships like our marriage or like people that you're working with or your friends, it's going to require a lot of deposits. With continuing expectations, old deposits evaporate. Accounts with the people you interact with on a regular basis require more constant investment. Sometimes automatic withdrawals. So yeah, it goes to the example of the kid cleaning the room. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we're down here. You need a positive balance to communicate on these tender issues. What would happen if you started making deposits into the relationship? Opportunity comes to give other people kindness, 220. The most important deposit you can make with another person is really just listening. Without judging or preaching or reading your own autobiography, listen and seek to understand. That's habit 5. Let the other person feel that you're concerned about them and that you accept them as a person. And so he goes into this principle of unconditional positive regard, which comes from Carl Rogers, the psychologist. As those genuine deposits keep coming, they begin to add up. The overdrawn balance is shrinking. A quick fix is a mirage. Building and repairing relationships takes time. If you become impatient with this apparent lack of response or seeming ingratitude from the other person, making a huge withdrawal won't do any good. It takes character to be proactive, to focus on your circle of influence, to nurture growing things, and not to pull up the flowers to see how the roots are coming. There's no quick fix. Building and repairing relationships are long-term investments. Okay, so now we go into this section of this chapter where he's like, okay, well, I'm talking about this analogy, okay, the emotional bank account stuff, and I'm going to give you some examples, 6 examples of some major deposits, things that will increase your emotional bank account with somebody else more so than other stuff. Okay, so we'll read the slide first. So the first major deposit that we can have with somebody else to improve their disposition, how they feel about us, their trust with us. So slide 1 of 2 is understanding the individual. So now we don't know what constitutes a deposit to another person until you understand that individual. Because what they feel, they might have different interests and values than you or needs. And if you don't listen to them or at least observe them, then you might not know what those three things are. So an action could perceived as a withdrawal if it's not in line with the person's interests or needs. So for example, if somebody was like, hey, Achilles, we're going to go see the Blue Jays tonight. I bought you a ticket, right? And they're all excited. They got their hat on. They're wearing blue. I actually wouldn't be excited. I would be like, oh, no. I'm proud to say, people hate me for this. I'm proud to say I've been in Toronto for 11 years and I've not went to one sports game. I don't like sports. I think it's for me, it's a waste of time. I'm sure it's fun getting drunk, eating peanuts and hanging out in a stadium with people, but I go to other events like music events and I dance there where there's lots of people. So that for me, I still get that large crowd need met, which is actually very uncomfortable a lot of the time. So that would be a withdrawal from me, right? So number two, or if someone was like, come with me to church, I'd be like, like I'd have to have conditions. I wouldn't want to go. To make a deposit, you must show what is important to the other is also important to you. So if you truly love somebody, whatever they love, you love it too. Like it's vicarious though, right? It's like an indirect thing. I appreciate this because you appreciate it. So if you really, 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 really like, you could tell if I loved a woman if I went to a sports game with her, right? Because I would not go with my friends. I have not gone with my friends. So if you ever notice that I'm saying I'm going to see a sports game with this girl, I really, really like her because of how much I dislike sports.
But okay, I can understand. But I kind of feel like that, a little bit like you go to a thing that you actually didn't like, just because, and then you use it as a like a, but why you have to why a relation has to be like that, to show the love, why can't you, like using this example, maybe you can be, obviously people from different background, have different. It seems like you compromise.
That's the word.
Yourself, but why not, oh, okay, I'm curious, for example, I'm curious about why you like, why she likes, this sports game. Maybe he should tell her a lot, but why you like dancing, maybe on that one, you deepen understanding of each other.
Sure.
You found it interesting about the sports game, whatever. But again, another thing is why you have to do things together. Why you can go to your concert and she goes to the game, and then you still, that's like giving room for within the relation. Why is that not a good? Why you have to go to the?
You don't have to. Right. It's not that you have to. He's just like, he gives the example of like his friend or one of his clients or whatever. The friend didn't like baseball, but the kid loved it, his son, right? And it didn't matter that he didn't like it. It was the fact that the experience of them going together was something that made him a good father to that specific person, right? And he went beyond his own personal interests to look at the quality of the relationship in itself. And it was more valuable for them to go together than for him to just send him off with somebody else because of how much the kid valued it. It's like going to see your, people like go just watch their kids play sports, like it's not, you're not really there to watch the game, really. Like the parents that like look at it like that are the ones like yelling and shit, they're children, let them fucking play. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You're just there to be supportive because you care about them and they're learning and they're growing and they're trying to figure stuff out, like they're doing a physical activity that's challenging, right?
I just feel like I mean, maybe I'm wrong, I just feel like there's a little bit at least some variations, if not I remember one of the I heard one of the couple told us, they before they enter the relation, they talk to each other. Why would we should enter this relation?
Okay.
And then they agree that the probably the purpose of the relation is to enhance each one's the how to say the fullness or the life energy or whatever, the integrity of life. That's the only purpose. If and then nobody need to compromise for that, because each of them, they already, so what they do, they do a lot of communications, like if we have differences, then first I will be curious. I'm not just saying if you invite me to the dance, I will not say, oh, I never dance. I will ask, why you like dancing, and then a lot of things. Maybe I found a deeper reason for that. Then I will go together. But even I didn't go, that doesn't mean, but because of this communications, I have better understanding of her, and yet she also have better understanding me.
Yeah.
So so I'm just saying, it's a little bit stereotype. Like, oh, if I want to show support to my kid, I need to go to the game, or if I need to show support to my love, I need to go do something. Maybe we can do something on the third kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't have to be like that one,
I don't think you're condemned to do that. I think it's just it's an example of an option of something that is meaningful to the other person, and you can choose to do that. It's just one thing that you can choose to do. You're not like bound to do it.
Right.
And like, I think if something is, the other person would have to also recognize that you don't like the thing as an adult, right? Maybe a very emotionally intelligent kid could see that too, and then they might be able to say, hey, you don't have to come next time. You kind of want a partner that has that empathy too, right? Okay.
I guess the key is the communications.
Of course.
Maybe sometimes the kid or the partner wants to have some alone time. Wants to have some time for herself. Maybe she wants to go to the museum just by herself. Maybe she doesn't want you to go.
Sure.
So by communicating, the deeper needs, and you show the caring already.
Yeah.
The caring is I want to, because the whole thing, the purpose is not just be with you. Be with you is just a way to enhance our relation. So the goal is enhance the relation, and then being together or being not together, it's just maybe sometimes they need a long time. It's just a way. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Again, like the first habit 4, is think win-win. And so both people are supposed to get something out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, if my partner really likes like I don't like watching TV shows. Some TV shows I'm like, I just don't want to spend like, 200 hours doing that. You know what I mean? And so I think at the beginning, and that's why he says that in this chapter, he says it's important to outline what your expectations are, right? So that you don't get to a position where you have unfulfilled expectations. So if I start dating somebody and they're like, I want to watch, this new show, and I don't really like a lot of TV because usually the acting is poor quality, and it just drags on, and you didn't need to make it drag on that much, So it's not that it's drama that's bad. It's just that it's crappy drama. I don't need to see that. I'm like, what am I learning? My own life is crazy enough as it is. I don't need to watch these people be stupid, And so you can communicate those expectations. That's what the beginning of dating is. You know what I mean? But there might be some person that you just, no matter what, it's almost like I want to experience it with them to see, because they're so vibrant in my life. Their personality is so different than mine. Seeing how that person engages with that situation is actually cool for me. I wouldn't want to go by myself or other people, but and that's what the love is, Okay, let's continue. So he says, I'm just trying to get through this today.
Yeah.
To make a deposit, you must show what is important to the other person is also important to you. So that's kind of what we mean by that, right? It's a means to an end, though. It's not an end in itself. It's important because of some other reason, because you're trying to like develop your relationship. Or B, accepting the value he places on what he has to say, you show an understanding of the other person. So when people are communicating things that are important to them, right? We want to comprehend the degree of importance. What is the quality of this thing in their life? And then the other person, hopefully can recognize that we understand that. So he gives the example in this part of the guy's kid wants to go to baseball. Then they ask the dad, do you like baseball? He's like, no, but I care about my son, right? It's not the baseball that matters, it's my son that matters. Another example, so a college professor's disapproval. And is the college professor, his son wanted to work with his hands in like a trade. And he's like, oh, you're wasting your time. And
So I got one of my questions here, because you talk about, it's not like I care about baseball, I care about my son. But if we all heard about this, we cannot treat people just as a tool. We have to treat them as an end in itself, right? These people also include myself, right? Not just other people. So when I go to my son or go to partners, something I don't like, there's a question about, do I treat myself as an end also? Because if I go to something I don't like, I'm actually sacrificing my things, So and then Maslow to also talk about when they talk about self-actualization, there's a chapter talk about the relation, like a marriage or partnership between self-actualists.
okay.
So he talk about both they don't have to compromise. They just they locate, they tell exactly what you said, they tell, it's called mapping skills. So I tell you where I am, you tell me where you are, so we are very clear where we are. So I'm here, this is my goal of my life, I want to explore this, and and then you don't have to compromise. There's a resonation between two self-actualists. You don't have to, so there's a goal, there's a principle in that relation, like never compromise.
Yes.
But rather to be curious of each other. And then through the communication, you will find a lot more room to grow together.
I agree with that. I think that's a good way. I don't like compromising myself, right? Like, so I said, like, if he caught me going to a sports thing, it would be like, well, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And in this context, though, it's like they're dependents.
Yeah.
Like in both of these examples, it's the dad's kid, right? And so if the kid wants the dad to be there, nothing's going to replace it. Because you could also, like, let's say that,
that's for sure. The kid, yeah.
Like if it's like some music, like it's just, I think parents put up with a lot of like kids' TV shows that they don't want to watch, but they do it because it matters to the kid. And so that's the context this is being used in, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's the caring part.
Yeah, it's not really about you in that level. And it's not in a self-sacrificial way. It's just that like there's a higher ordered value that supersedes this other like hedonistic, I'm going to be sassy about baseball. Like it doesn't really matter, and like you need to understand that to the child, you're very, very important and your presence is what matters.
Yeah,
right?
Because one of the value, I think when you bring a kid to the world, then basically, it's also your value system. You have a responsibility to provide the support, for this kid, to be able to that kind of duty. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right, let's continue. So the second example, the college professor doesn't want the kid to be a laborer or a tradesperson. And the problem is projecting our own autobiography on what others think or what we think they need. And so even though the professor wanted this specific path, it's not fair for the professor to impose those life decisions on his son. And he says, to understand them deeply as individuals, the way you would want to be understood, and then treat them in terms of that understanding. So he's taught, this is a principle for him, understand how other people want to be treated, and then treat them that way, not in the way that we want to be treated, right? So it's like a criticism of the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated, treat others the way they want to be treated, right? Okay, so let's look at the book here. So we're on page 220. So he says he's going to suggest 6 major deposits to build an emotional bank account. So we're just going with this as like a tool. We're going to use this transactional tool to understand relationships a little bit better. So the first is understand the individual. Really seeking to understand another person is probably one of the most important deposits you can make. And it's the key to every other deposit. You simply don't know what constitutes a deposit to another person until you understand that individual. What might be a deposit for you might not be perceived by someone else as a deposit at all. It might even be perceived as a withdrawal. It doesn't meet that person's interests or needs. One person's mission is another person's obstruction. To make a deposit, what is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you. So he's saying that in a way to help us understand. It's like a metaphor. 221. It takes habit 2, begin with the end in mind, to recognize and recommit yourself to the value of that person. And habit 3, put first things first, to subordinate, your schedule to that human priority. By accepting the value they place on what they have to say, or on what the other person says, you show an understanding of them, and that makes a great deposit. So he gives an example, a friend whose son developed an interest in baseball. The friend didn't like baseball. However, he took his son to see every major league team play one game. It took over 6 weeks and cost a lot of money, but it was a powerful bonding experience in their relationship. When he caught back, someone asked him, "Do you like baseball?" He said, "No, but I like my son." Another friend was a college professor. He had a terrible relationship with his teenage son. The man's entire life was essentially academic. He felt his son was totally wasting his life by working with his hands. As a result, he was always on the kid's back, and there was moments of regret. He would try to make deposits that just didn't work. The boy perceived his father's gestures as a new form of rejection, comparison, and judgment, precipitated a huge withdrawal. The principle of making what is important to the other person as important to you, he took it to heart. And so they decided to make a miniature Great Wall of China at their house. Through this bonding experience, the son moved through that phase in his life and into an increased desire to develop his mind. He got through the working with his hand phase. The real benefit was what happened to the relationship. It became a source of joy and strength for both father and son. Our tendency is to project our own autobiographies of what we think other people want or need. We project, page 222, our intentions on the behavior of others. We interpret what constitutes a deposit based on our own needs and desires, either now or when we were at a similar age or stage in life. If they don't interpret our effort as a deposit, we have a tendency to take that as a rejection of our well-intentioned effort, and we could give up. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. On the surface, it could mean do for them what you would like them to have done for you, but he's interpreting this meaning is to understand them deeply as an individual, the way you would want to be understood, then treat them in terms of that understanding, which is actually different than what the golden rule says, but he's like, he's doing some rationalization.
Yeah, question. For example, we'll talk about kids, for example, a partner, or, a husband and wife, they already, kind of their relation is broke up, but they have kids. So, so they they keep the relation. They didn't broke up because get divorced or whatever, separate, because they think, oh, this is good for the kids.
Yeah.
So the kids can still at least have a complete family.
It's not a broken home.
So is this regarded like invest like this like in like a sacrifice or invest in, because you are putting in the kids emotional bank, so you still being together. I mean, on this particular situation, is it the right way to do to still maintain the relation together, just for the kids, to give kids a complete family?
I think that it depends on the two people, that, like the parents. If they really don't get along, like, if they're in conflict and the children are going to perceive that conflict, that's not good. It's better to be apart. If they don't value or will not find growth from other relationships with other people, then maybe they can live independently together as friends and then raise the kids because it's just easier, right? But, if somebody like myself, I would maybe have a situation where we had a living arrangement where I could sleep over so I could help with the parenting, right? But I would, if I'm not satisfied with the mother of my children for whatever reason, right? Like if I'm not growing as a person, then I would want to find someone I can grow with. That's meaningful to me in my life. Now I function as a single person, right? But to live knowing I can't, because as a single person, I know that if I do meet somebody, I can engage in that opportunity. But if I couldn't do that, then I would suffer. The thought that I wouldn't be able to see anyone if I wasn't getting that need currently met from this other person. So I wouldn't be my full self, and not being that full self, I couldn't be my full self with my children. So if being my full self means having another woman or whatever, then just the mother, then I would need to do that in a healthy way, clarifying boundaries and discussing stuff and managing it together, not being deceitful and cheating on anybody, right? All right, let's continue. So he says, on the surface could mean, yes, we said that. The essential meaning is understand deeply, yeah. Raising children, treat them all the same by treating them differently. So he's just treat everybody as an individual, is what you're saying. Okay, so next part here, attending to the little things. Little kindness and courtesies are so important. Small discourtesies, little unkindnesses, little forms of disrespect make large withdrawals. So like, again, if you have like a disrespectful thing, it's not just that instance, it's the way you're relating to them categorically that's a problem as well. So he gives this example of he's with his kids and his son had some anxiety and he wanted reassurance from his dad. And he says like, hey, daddy, if I was cold, would you put your coat around me too? Because he showed love and care for his younger brother and then he felt left out. Mm-hmm. And so Stephen Covey was receptive to his son feeling that way. And then he says of all the events of that night, they went out and did a bunch of fun activities together. The most important was this little act of kindness, not going to the movies or playing games or any of the flashy entertainment things. It was the love that he showed for his brother. So, okay, we're on 222. Little kindnesses and courtesies are so important. Small discourtesies, unkindnesses, little forms of disrespect, they make large withdrawals. Relationships, the little things can be very, very big. One evening, he was with his two sons. They organized a father and son outing. They did a bunch of stuff together. In the movie, his youngest son fell asleep. His older son stayed awake. They watched the movie. He picked up the younger one, and then they went home together. And then he put his coat around the younger one, and then later the older one was like, I guess, jealous or sad or something like that. A powerful personal lesson that experience was. People are very tender, very sensitive inside. I don't believe age or experience makes much of a difference. Even the toughest, most callous exterior people, they still have tender feelings and emotions of the heart. Next one is keeping commitments. Keeping commitments or a promise is a major deposit. Breaking one is a major withdrawal. So 223, not more massive withdrawal than to make a promise that's important to someone than not to come through. So you could not make the promise at all, but then you could like disappoint them. The next time the promise is made, they won't believe it. People tend to build their hopes around promises about their basic livelihood. Adopted philosophy as a parent, never to make a promise that you couldn't keep. Therefore, try to make them very carefully and sparingly, to be aware of as many variables and contingencies as possible. So something doesn't suddenly come up to keep him from fulfilling it. Despite all of his effort, unexpected things do happen, creating a situation where it would be unwise or impossible to keep the promise. If he values but he still values that promise. Either he keeps it anyway, or he explains the situation thoroughly to the person involved and asks them to be released from the promise. So I think that could be unrealistic sometimes, like, assuming that they understand, but they might not understand. You might have to just do it anyways. 224. If you cultivate the habit of always keeping the promises you make, you build bridges of trust that span the gaps of understanding between you and your child. When your child wants to do something you don't want them to do, you can say, if you do this, I promise this will be the result. If you've cultivated trust with that other person, your kid, they're more likely to act even if they don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, that'll be a good thing. Like going to the dentist is better for you. Whatever. Number 4, clarifying expectations. So he has the boss employee assumptions to create your job description. So if we don't clarify expectations, things can get confusing. So usually we expect that our boss will have our job description. And he says, well, what if your boss didn't do that? And then asks you why you didn't give it to him? It would be very confusing. Relationship difficulties rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals. So it's important to clarify what our expectations are. The problem, unclear expectations will lead to misunderstanding, disappointment, and withdrawals of trust. Expectations are implicit. People bring them to situations. Fulfilling them makes great deposits, and violating them makes great withdrawals. So it's important, especially in new situations, to make our expectations explicit. Negative situations created by assumptions are evident, understood, and shared by others. It's a deposit to be explicit in new situations, to avoid making them negative through ambiguity. So 224. Imagine a difficulty you might encounter if you and your boss had different assumptions regarding whose role it was to create your job description. So you say, when am I going to get my job description? The boss says, waiting for you to bring it to me so we could discuss it. And you say, well, I thought defining my job was your role. And then your boss says, that's not my role at all. How you do in the job is largely depends on you. I thought that meant the quality of my job depended on me, but I don't even really know what my job is. Unclear expectations in the area of goals also undermine communication and trust. For example, I did exactly what you asked me to do here, and here's the report. The boss says, I don't want a report. The goal was to solve the problem, not analyze and report on it. And I thought the goal was to get a handle on the problem so we could delegate it to somebody else. So just confusion about what we're doing, right? He says the cause of almost all relationship difficulties is rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals, which goes back to habit 2, right? Begin with the end in mind. Dealing with the question of who does what at work, how you communicate with your kids, for example, cleaning the room, who does the chores in the house. 225. We can be certain that unclear expectations will lead to misunderstanding, disappointment, and withdrawals of trust. Many expectations are implicit. They haven't been explicitly stated or announced. People nevertheless bring them to a particular situation. For example, a marriage. A man and a woman have implicit expectations of each other in the marriage roles. Expectations have not been discussed, sometimes even recognized by the person who has them. Fulfilling them would make great deposits in the relationship, and violating them will make great withdrawals. This is why it's important whenever you come into a new situation to get all the expectations out and make it explicit. People will begin to judge each other through those expectations. If they feel like their basic expectations have been violated, the reserve of trust becomes diminished. We create many negative situations by simply assuming that our expectations are self-evident and that they are clearly understood and shared by other people. So this is like a distortion of mind reading by David Burns.
Yep.
The deposit is to make expectations clear and explicit in the beginning. It takes an investment of time and effort up front, but it saves a great amount of time and effort down the road. Expectations are not always clear and shared. People become emotionally involved, and simple misunderstandings become compounded, turning into a clash of personality or communication breakdowns. Clarifying expectations sometimes takes a great deal of courage. It's sometimes easier to act as though differences don't exist and to hope things will work out than it is to face differences and work together to arrive at a mutually agreeable set of expectations. Number 5, showing personal integrity. So this is 1 of 2. Personal integrity generates trust. A lack of integrity can undermine any effort. So integrity is following through with your commitments, for example. Honesty is telling the truth, confirming words to reality. Integrity is confirming reality to words, keeping promises and expectations. So for example, you're criticizing a supervisor. If someone else is criticizing the supervisor, you could agree with the content of some of the criticism and suggest that both of you go directly to the supervisor and make a presentation on how things can be better. But if this duplicity or being a hypocrite, you could appear to be making a deposit with the person you're with, but actually it's a withdrawal because you communicate your own lack of integrity. You're talking behind somebody's back, for example. Integrity of standardized principles. All treated under the same principles creates trust. You avoid this double standard, treating people differently. A confrontation takes courage. You earn trust and respect with honest and open care in confrontation. So being assertive, right? The 99 to 1 ratio. Only that is testing the patience and the good humor of the many. How you treat one person reveals how you regard the 99. This is like the categorical imperative. Everyone is ultimately one. We're all human. And we want to avoid deception. A lie in it is any communication with the intent to deceive, because that shows that we are not, we don't have integrity in our character. So, 225. Personal integrity generates trust and is the basis of many different kinds of deposits. Lack of integrity can undermine almost any other effort to create high trust accounts. People can seek to understand, remember the little things, keep their promises, clarify and fulfill expectations, and still fail to build reserves of trust if they are inwardly hypocritical or duplicitous. Integrity includes but goes beyond honesty. Honesty is telling the truth, confirming our words to reality. Integrity is conforming words to reality, conforming reality to our words, i.e. keeping our promises. 226. And fulfilling expectations. This requires an integrated character and openness, primarily with self, but also with life. The most important ways to manifest integrity is to be loyal to those who are not present. So that's a principle I didn't write down earlier, I don't think. We build the trust of those who are present. When you defend those who are absent, you retain the trust of those who are present. Jesus saying, don't talk shit behind people's back, basically. But I think that's different than venting and getting emotional support. We talked about that earlier. So for example, you and I are talking alone, we're criticizing our supervisor in a way they would not want to hear. What will happen if you and I have a falling out? I'll be discussing your weaknesses with somebody else. What you and I did behind our supervisor's back, that is part of my nature. So he says, like, you'll sweet talk somebody to their face and badmouth them behind their back. So this is a duplicity. There's two versions of yourself, right? On the other hand, suppose you and I were to start criticizing, you were to start criticizing our supervisor, and I told you I agree with some of the content, and then I suggest we go and talk to the supervisor and discuss it together. Another example, in my effort to build a relationship with you, I told you someone else had shared me, I told you what someone else told me in confidence. It was private. And I say, I shouldn't tell you this, but since you're my friend, I'm going to tell you anyways. Would me betraying another person build my trust with you? Or would you wonder if the things you had told me in confidence were being shared with others? This duplicity might appear to be making a deposit or double standard with the person you're with, but actually it's a withdrawal because you communicate your own lack of integrity. You say you're going to do one thing and you do another.
On the supervisor things, I do have a question. Like sometimes, it depends on the culture, the corporate culture.
Okay.
If because there's a power, there's a power things playing here. Yeah. The supervisor or he maybe represent the interest of the company, and then you are an employee. You tell if everything if you tell that you may get damaged because the power is different. And Foucault actually talk about this like how the power play in the human relations. So I mean, in a very ideal situation, maybe you will get good result if the supervisor is very open, the company culture is very open.
Yeah,
but
true.
So that sometimes people, it's not like people don't want to talk honestly. It's because the environment doesn't favor honesty.
Yeah, and so I think there's a way that you can communicate, just not calling the person out directly. You can talk about like a higher ordinate goal that everybody can agree on, a standard that's universal, and then ask for, like, say things like, how can we meet this objective or standard? Instead of saying you're not doing it, how can we cooperate together?
Yeah, that's like using some text. I know. Yeah. I mean, because of what I'm saying, that there's a bigger environment here.
Mm-hmm.
That because individuals live in this environment, we live in a society. Yeah. It's there are some challenging situation that it's just very difficult.
It might be that you need to start having an exit strategy to get away from a toxic work environment, right? If it's not a win-win, which we'll talk about next, then you just find a better place. Find a place where you can, or create it yourself, And yeah. All right. So we're over here. So he says, yeah. And then he says, the golden egg of temporary pleasure from putting someone down or sharing privileged information, you're strangling the goose, weakening the relationship that provides enduring pleasure and association. Integrity in an interdependent reality is simply this: you treat everyone by the same set of principles. As you do, people will come to trust you. Not at first appreciate the honest confrontational experiences such integrity might generate. Confrontation takes considerable courage. Many people would prefer to take the course of least resistance. Belittling and criticizing, betraying confidences, 227, participating in gossip about others behind their backs. In the long run, people will trust and respect you if you're honest and open and kind with them. You care enough to confront, to be trusted, is greater than to be loved. But in the long run, to be trusted will also be to be loved. So he has one of his sons was young, and would frequently ask me a soul-searching question. Whenever I overreacted to someone else or was the least bit impatient or unkind, he was so vulnerable and so honest, and our relationship was so good that he would simply look at me and say, "Dad, do you love me?" If he thought I was breaking a basic principle of life towards someone else, he would wonder if I would break it towards him. As a teacher or a parent, the key to the 99 is the one that is testing the patience and the good humor of the many. The love and the discipline of the one student, one child, communicates love for others. How you treat the one reveals how you regard the 99. Everyone is ultimately one. So it's the categorical imperative. Integrity also means avoiding any communication that is deceptive or beneath the dignity of people. A lie is any communication with the intent to deceive. Communicate with words or behavior. If we have integrity, our intent cannot be to deceive. So this is the last suggestion. Apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. So it's the nature of an apology. The strength to apologize quickly out of one's heart rather than out of pity. So it's important to be genuine and when we apologize, because people will be able to feel that in our relationships. To be a deposit, it must be perceived as sincere. She gives this example or quote from Leo Ruskin: "Weak who are cruel, the gentleness can only be expected from the strong." So sincere apologies are deposits, but if you repeatedly apologize for something and don't learn from it, it becomes a withdrawal. Mistakes are quite another thing not to admit it. People will forgive mistakes because mistakes are usually of the mind, mistakes of judgment. They do not easily forgive the mistakes of the heart, the ill intention or bad motives. So there's like a little bit of a false dichotomy here. It's not just one or the other in this sense, but he's just trying to say that like, he's really just trying to talk about not lying to people, right? Mm-hmm. So 227, when we make withdrawals from the emotional bank account, we need to apologize and do it sincerely. It takes a great deal of character strength to apologize quickly out of one's heart rather than out of pity. A person must possess himself and have a deep sense of security and fundamental principles and values in order to genuinely apologize. 228, people with little internal security can't do it. It makes them too vulnerable. They feel it makes them appear soft and weak, fear that others will take advantage of their weakness. Security is based on the opinions, if it's based on the opinions of other people, they worry about what others might think of them. Usually feel justified in what they did, rationalize their own wrong in the name of the other person's wrong. If they apologize at all, it's superficial. So we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. To be a deposit, an apology must be sincere and perceived as such. So he was in his office at home writing some stuff, specifically on patience, and his kids were running down the hall, and his own patience was waning. And then his son started pounding on the bathroom door and yelling. He rushed out of his office and spoke to him with great intensity. Do you have any idea how disturbing this is to me? How hard it is for me to concentrate and write creatively? Go to your room and stay there until you can behave yourself. So his kid went into his room. As he turned around, he became aware of another problem. The boys had been playing tackle football in the hallway, and one of them got elbowed in the mouth, lying on the ground, bleeding. David, his son, who was yelling at the door of the bathroom, was trying to go get a wet towel to help his brother, but his sister was using the bathroom, wouldn't open the door. Stephen Covey misinterpreted the situation and overreacted, so he went to go apologize to his son. He opened the door. The first thing his son says was, "I won't forgive you." He's like, "Well, why not?" "I didn't realize you're trying to help your brother." And then his kid said, "You did the same thing last week. You're overdrawn and you're not going to talk your way out of the problem you behaved yourself into," is what his kid was saying to him. Sincere apologies make deposits. Repeated apologies interpreted as insincere make withdrawals. The quality of the relationship reflects it. It's one thing to make a mistake, and it's another thing not to even admit it. People usually forgive mistakes of the mind and judgment, but they will not easily forgive mistakes that are based in mistakes that are not even like it's a mistake, but if the person doesn't accept it, if their intentions or motives are bad,
I wonder did Trump ever apologize? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think he apologized for anything, right?
Yeah. When he's asked about that, I think he says he's never done anything wrong.
Right.
Even in court,
right.
when he's like charged, he's still
right.
There's never a crime here. Nothing happened. It's like nothing happened. No murder here.
Yeah. Yesterday debated when we talk about the Capitol Hill things, right?
Oh yeah.
He said that it was Nancy Pelosi's fault. Something like, they have already called to the mayor. The mayor didn't send the National Guard. That's why. So I never heard he apologize for anything.
Yeah, that's the narcissism, right? The arrogance. That's arrogance, for sure. Okay, laws of love and the laws of life. Slide 1 of 2. So unconditional love, when we act lovingly, we promote we promote being loving. It creates a sense of security, safety. We feel validated and affirmed in our essential worth, identity, and integrity. The freedom to act on our inner imperatives rather than react to conditions and limitations. So the notion of unconditional positive regard, or loving someone unconditionally, not because they're doing what you want them to do. So you have to the dean of this of some school. His son was, or rebellion is the not of the heart, not of the mind. His son felt his father's desire for him to attend a school, but felt that want for his son outweighed the value of him as a person. The love was conditional. After he felt that his father loved him and accepted him for his decision not to go, he learned he actually wanted to go, so he changed his mind. Then there's the example of Hammarskjöld. Give yourself completely to one individual than to labor diligently for the salvation of the masses. So it's important to focus. He uses this as you could talk about quality versus quantity, but he is also talking about our close relationships. It's important, though they have higher quality because they're close, and therefore it's better to invest in those and make them healthy than distribute yourself amongst a bunch of like superficial relationships. Like if you have a really good relationship with the person you buy coffee from, that's different if you're like getting divorced, right? Or if you're have anger issues with your partner or whatever else. Rebuild that one relationship, then it would be to continue putting all those hours for all those people and causes, other people that are not your primary relationship or ones that are close to you. Confront and resolve those issues than it does to continue to diligently work for the many projects and people out there. So rebuild a relationship, confront the deeper issues, to get them all on the table, resolve them one by one with a spirit of high mutual respect. So he gives that as a business example. So 229, we're almost done this chapter. We make deposits of unconditional love. We live in the primary, when we live the primary laws of love. So again, what is that? But whatever. We encourage others to live the primary laws of life. When we truly love others without condition, without strings, we help them feel secure and safe and validated and affirmed in their essential worth, identity, and integrity. The natural growth process is encouraged. We make it easier for them to live the laws of life, cooperation, contribution, self-discipline, integrity, and to discover that and live true to the highest and best within them. We give them the freedom to act on their own inner imperatives rather than react to our conditions and limitations. Does not mean we become permissive or soft. That itself is a massive withdrawal. We counsel, plead, set limitations and consequences, but we love them regardless. So he's saying that to love someone unconditionally doesn't mean that you give up your values or your integrity. It just means that you love them no matter what they do in some ways, but you can still discuss things if there's problems. When we violate the primary laws of love, when we attach strings and conditions, we actually encourage others to violate those primary laws of life. We put them in a reactive, defensive position where they feel they have to prove, I matter. In reality, they aren't independent. They are counterdependent, which is another form of dependency, the lowest end of the maturity continuum. They become reactive, enemy-centered, concerned about defending their rights and producing evidence of their individuality than they are about proactively listening to and honoring their own inner imperatives. Rebellion is the not of the heart, not of the mind. The key is to make deposits, constant deposits of unconditional love. 230. So his friend was the dean of a very good school. He planned and stayed for years so his son could go to the same institution. When the time came, his son refused. The father was upset. Graduating from that school would be a great asset to his kid. It was a family tradition. They had many generations of attendance. The father pleaded and urged and talked. He tried to listen to the boy and understand him, hoping that his son would change his mind. The subtle message communicated was of a conditional love. The son felt that the father's desire for him to attend the school was more important than the value he had for him as his own son. It felt threatening, and the son felt he had to fight for his own identity and integrity, which increased his rationalization to not go. After some soul searching, the father decided to make a sacrifice, to renounce his conditional love. He knew that his son might choose differently than he wished, but he chose to love his son unconditionally, regardless of his son's choice. The value of education and experience was so close to their hearts, the father and the mother, because they had planned on this since he was born. The father and mother went through a difficult rescripting process, struggling to understand the nature of unconditional love. They communicated to the boy that what they were doing and why, and told him that they had come to this point in which they could say in all honesty that his decision would not affect their complete feeling of unconditional love towards him. They didn't do it to manipulate him. They did it as the logical extension of their own growth and their own character. The boy didn't give much of a response at the time. The paradigm of unconditional love that didn't make a difference to the parents. A week later, though, the boy decided he wanted to go instead, 231. And they were prepared for this response as well and unconditionally loved him anyway. And so then there's the example of Hammarskjöld. He was the past Secretary General of the United Nations. Profound, far-reaching statement. It's more noble to give yourself completely to one individual than to labor diligently for the salvation of the masses. Covey interprets this as, I could devote 8, 10, 12 hours, many days a week to thousands of people and projects out there and still have a deep, meaningful relationship with my own partner, your kids, or people that you work with. It would take more nobility of character, humility, courage, and strength to rebuild that one relationship than it would be to put all your time and effort into all these other people. The power of the statement, many of the problems in organizations stem from relationship difficulties at the very top, between two partners in a professional firm, between the owner and the president of a company, between the president and an executive or vice president. It takes more nobility of character to confront and resolve those issues than it does to continually diligently work for many people and projects elsewhere. So when he first read this statement by Hammarskjöld, he was working with an organization where there were unclear expectations between the individual who was his right-hand man and himself. He did not have the courage to confront the differences regarding the roles and expectations, values, and their methods of administration. So he worked for a few months in a compromised mode to avoid, so he's identifying this compromising thing, to avoid what might turn out to be an ugly confrontation. And they had bad feelings in both of them. 232. After he read this, he realized it's more noble to give himself completely to one individual than many. He was affected by this and started thinking about the idea of rebuilding this relationship. He had to feel strength because it would be difficult to get to the issues and achieve a deep common understanding and commitment. He was shaking in anticipation for this meeting. It seemed like the other guy seemed like a very hard person set in his own ways. And he needed, but at the same time to cooperate, they needed each other's strengths and their abilities. So they had to confront their relationship, and in some ways jeopardizing it so that they could benefit in the long run. He went through a mental dress rehearsal and became settled within himself around the principles rather than the practices of what he was going to do and say. He felt a sense of peace of mind, Stephen Covey, and the courage to have the communication with this other guy. When they met, he discovered that the other person was also stressed out and not happy with the process that's been going on. And he was, in his idea that he would be hard and defensive was wrong. Their administrative styles were very, very different, and the entire organization was feeling the backlash of that. And they acknowledged their problems and discussed it. Over several visits, they confronted the deeper issues to get them all out on the table and resolve them one by one. With a spirit of mutual respect, they were able to develop a powerful complementary team and personal affection that added tremendously to their ability to work effectively together. Creating the unity necessary to run an effective business or family or marriage requires the great personal strength and courage. No amount of technical administrative skill and laboring for the masses can make up for the lack of nobility of personal character and developing relationships. It's very essential, one-on-one level, that we live the primary laws of love and life. So that's what he means by that. Cooperation and stuff. Okay. We're almost done. Key problems or PC opportunities. This is good. The way we see problems can be an opportunity to build a deeper relationship that empowered us to work together in a strong team environment. So every time we see a problem of production, it's actually a problem within the production capability, which is an opportunity, because if we solve the capability problem, we'll get more production. So when the problem occurs, it is a sign that is giving us the ability to work on something deeper. And this example would be building the emotional bank account. So if you kids have problems, it's an opportunity to build on the relationship. It goes from transactional to transformational. So he's identifying this transactional notion, but he wants us to see the deeper relationship that we have with people. Okay, 233, we have 2 pages left. Powerful paradigm of interdependence, way in which we see problems. So you've lived for months trying to avoid problems, seeing it as a source of irritation, a stumbling block, and wishing it would go away. The very problem created the opportunity to build a deeper relationship that empowered us to work together and strong. as a team, the previous relationship with that guy in the business. An interdependent situation. Every P problem is a PC opportunity, a chance to build the emotional bank account that will significantly affect interdependent production. So for example, parents and their kids, they can see the problems as opportunities to build a relationship instead of a negative, burdensome irritation. It will change the nature of the parent-child interaction. Parents become more willing, excited about deeply understanding and helping their children. When a child comes to them with a problem, instead of thinking, oh no, another problem, the paradigm is, here's a great opportunity for me to really help my kid and invest in our relationship. Many interactions change from transactional to transformational, and strong bonds of love and trust are created as children sense the value parents give to their problems and to them as individuals, because you're taking them seriously, right? And what matters to them matters to you. That goes back to that principle. The paradigm is powerful in business as well. So an example is this department store chain operates from this paradigm, created a great loyalty amongst its customers. Anytime a customer comes to the store with a problem, all the staff see it as an opportunity to build a relationship with the customer. The staff respond in a cheerful, positive desire to solve the problem in a way that will make the customer happy. They treat the customer with great respect, and the customers are very loyal to the company. They don't want to go anywhere else. By recognizing that the P-PC balance is necessary to effectiveness and an interdependent reality, we can value our problems as opportunities to increase production capability. Okay, last slide. Oh, I guess I don't have the last slide. Anyways, the habits of interdependence, the last section here, very short. So again, interdependence is a public victory that we do after we've dealt with our own personal private victory habits, being proactive, knowing what our goals are and our roles, and then managing our time. And then we work with others, right? So this is interdependence. And one model we can use in working with others transactionally and transformationally is to start with the emotional bank account metaphor. That's what we're doing here. So the paradigm of the emotional bank account in mind, we move into the habits of public victory, of success in working with other people, 234. See how these habits work together to create effective interdependence. See how powerfully scripted we are in other patterns of thought and behavior. We can see an even deeper level that effective interdependence can only be achieved by truly independent people. Impossible to achieve public victory with a win-win negotiation technique or reflective listening techniques or creative problem-solving techniques if you're focused on like charisma in the moment and not your underlying character. So yeah, and then next we go to habit 4, which is think win-win. All right, we'll see you guys next week.